Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
We did not engage in conflict that was out of line with our mission.
Is it disloyalty? Is it sedition? Is it treason to oppose the hands of tyranny? Never!
I will never send troops anywhere on a mission of that kind without telling them that if somebody shoots at them, they can darn well shoot back.
I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty! Oh, give me death!
A dark cloud is finally lifting across the world as U.S. military intelligence and their global partners are destroying the deep state criminal power structure that has ruled over our planet for hundreds of years.
We are free with the God-given right, and we shall not yield that right to any power on earth.
Hi, I'm Scott McKay. The world is at, and I am your host on The Tipping Point on Revolution Radio, where every Monday from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, we bring you the latest in this ensuing takedown of this global criminal empire.
That's an image of strength.
You'll get the raw, hard truth here on The Tipping Point. So come join us Mondays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern in Studio B at revolution.radio.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it.
Right! You tell them I'm coming! And hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum, and the media overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time: cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David Dubine, creator of the Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age 2015 to 2035 video series.
And I need to update the intro and Ransom Godwin 420 TV Freedomist Films right here on the live stream. Rumble tonight, YouTube, and Revolution Radio. Now, anybody thinking about buying grass seed? Don't. Hold on. This happens once a year. If your first mow of your yard and you start to see it coming up and it looks like it's going to go to seed, it is. It's springtime. And you can take that and bag your clippings and just go sprinkle them around and they will grow again. It's as if you're cutting a stalk of something with a seed on it and you're just replanting the seeds. Yeah, let the mower do all the work, bag it for you, and then you just spread it out on the bare bits around your yard or just areas that you want to grass in. Free seed, because seed's so ridiculous expensive right now. I can't believe it's like $50 for a 40-pound bag or something with just grass seed. I'm not talking about edibles, but just grass. So, I mean, if you can avoid that expense right now, and an old timer told me that, never would have known it. But see, that was the old knowledge from somebody who was, 20 years older than myself. It's like, why would you buy grass seed? My brother had the best lawn ever on the planet ever. It was like, out of a landscaping magazine, beautiful lawn. And all he did was save his grass clippings at the first cut once in the beginning of the spring right now and disperse it around. So anyway, that's my tip for the day. Ransom, thanks for joining. We'll be coming on here. How are you set for YouTube and Rumble tonight?
I believe we are broadcasting live on Rumble, Twitch, and my YouTube channel. And
Twitch! How could I forget Twitch? Yeah, we're really trying to expand the reach of the show to cover more ground with the same message, because right now it's the time to get these conversations started, especially with family members. We've got Easter coming up. A lot of dots to connect in tonight's program. And those are things that should be talked about, like food inflation. Like, your dinner is going to cost you nearly double than it did last year. Those are kind of things like, hey, did you think about extra food or something? It's a great time to bring up conversations around the dinner table for Easter.
Absolutely. I was kind of tripping out on you talking about the free seeds. You just described my entire method of farming. I just started out with a little bitty box of seeds. I grew those plants, and then I collected all the seeds of everything. And for the last 2 years, I've been increasing the number. I just have bags and boxes of seeds and jars of seeds I've been hiding. And then I get bored. I go outside and I find a few seeds that maybe fell out of something, and I just grab them and I go shove them in the ground somewhere. And speaking of free seeds, all of these sticker bushes and stuff, I'm doing the exact opposite of that. So I'm going through on all of those when they start growing and blooming, and I let the flower be there. But then when they start making the little spines, I just pull them up and get rid of them, because I'm trying to replace them with, wild stuff like sorghum and amaranth and all of this other stuff to just naturally grow in the crevices and cracks as a camouflage food source. They're just there. It's not like something I'm going to harvest. However, it does bring in the birds, which eat most of the pests that, occupy the other plants that I'm also trying to cultivate. The birds love those little squash bugs, so that they're over there pecking at them and getting rid of them. So, if I keep them full of lots of birds hanging out and they're all comfortable there, and you give them a little spot of water, you just start an ecosystem that wasn't there before. I was really, surprised to look at my property from above with my drone. Last time I flew it up above my house to look at the difference in the amount of time. Like, you can go to Google Images and look at my home, and it's like a barren lot with no greenery at all. And now I'm turning it into a place like, not just me, but the wildlife wants to hang out in. There's no poisons, no toxins. And from the bugs to the birds, everybody's getting a little bit of free food.
Should be like that. Walk through edible landscaping. And if you realize that it's that easy, and once you start planting those, if they're perennials or annuals, both, once you get it in place and it's a set configuration of edible landscape, and that plant accompanies that other one, those two go together, those three to go together, you can make a row with that, and once you plant it, it grows on its own. That's kind of the idea of some of these plans of edible landscapes. So how many people would have walked by the sorghum and not known it was there? Like in an emergency situation, and I really hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we are definitely going into a very food insecure time on the planet with unbelievable sticker shock to the point where your jaw is going to drop and you go, no, it's too, no, I'm not paying that much for that thing. That's where we're going to on almost every product really soon. So any little tricks or tips that you can get to start to think about how to be more self-sufficient. And, that's a free grass source. Dude, I had thousands and thousands of dollars worth of seed just catching my grass clippings. And really, if I was looking at it and we were like, what? Filled up the back of the pickup truck plus. And I was thinking, if you tried to put that into bags and sell it, you'd be buying easily 20 or 30 bags of seed. No, it's not as, dense, but it still comes with its own straw, basically. Sheesh, what can you expect? You throw the seed down. If you can collect seeds anywhere in the wild and you can recognize wild plants, right now is a great time to forage too. I saw a bunch of plantains coming up, which is salad. But these food insecure times, I don't know. We're going to have to start thinking of things in a very different way. I don't think a lot of people are ready for it. Myself, even me trying to, work through, okay, we don't have that. There's a hole over there. We need to get this still here. We need an automated thing. We need timers. We need these drip hoses. Oh, no. What about somebody who's just saying, oh, no, prices are getting really, really high everywhere. I need to start buying more stuff because it's going to get expensive next month or the next month or in the middle of summer. It's going to be way cheaper to buy it now. That's starting from zero. That's kind of where a lot of the planet sits right now. And things are going to get incredibly pricey, let's say that. I'm already looking at where they're talking about a stock out, which means like these London Metal Exchange and the COMEX, when big companies, real companies come in there and say, we need a contract from whatever. It goes into the warehouse there and somebody says, I will buy 1,000 tons of this on contract. And when it comes this time, give me my metal. I need it for manufacturing. Like that whole thing is breaking apart. So beyond what you see with the food, there's this whole thing with raw materials getting to anywhere to start building anything or making anything. And that whole thing is broken down at the very base source of that metal can't even get to a company to start process number one to get you your fill in the blank XYZ electronic product or a car or whatever. So you're seeing it on both ends. They're both running parallel tracks. So anything you can do to save some cash right now is probably a very good thought. It's going to be a mind exercise. I don't know, Ransom.
Absolutely. I think, I try not to read too much into the propaganda, but when the propaganda is so thick in one direction, you kind of know that they're going to go in that direction. And, I'm scamming through the airwaves, I guess you call it in modern times now in the internet. And all I'm seeing is the reorganization setting up for a World War III scenario. And, for a long time, people thought China, they kind of dismissed them as far as their nuclear capabilities. But they're expanding those right now. And they are, I'm watching over there as they're rounding up pets and they're locking people up and the lockdowns are expanding. And we've already seen this show happen once before. They gave it to us in 2019, 2020, 2021. And I don't think that for 1 second that they're not going to try it again, because the first time they wanted to see how far they could push it. They found out the limits, the boundaries, kind of when people started fighting back then. And we predicted this, actually. We talked about it, about how they would let everybody free for a little while because of the way that incrementalism works. So they feel like, well, they just had to do that. And then now we're seeing from coast to coast, they're re-implementing mask mandates, which means that lockdowns are not far to follow. And, I got this weird, sneaky suspicion, like if I'm not a super intellectual, And I'm just a common guy, and I'm thinking, what would I do if I really wanted to get rid of my enemies, as far as the people in the public that don't believe me, the troublemakers, the outliers, and things like that? Well, you would create a super division in the cultures everywhere, and that's all what we've been seeing from COVID to the Ukraine. There's a super division on every single little topic, and they keep everybody occupied with this. But at the same time, they made everybody volunteer into this new system of where you have to pick one or the other, and they make everything black or white, when the topics that are not black or white, those are the ones that they force you into this, you're for or against. And the things that are black and white are now subject to not being the way it is or the way it isn't. And they've got everyone set up for a complete fake. And what I mean is that all of the people that didn't buy into this first pandemic, in my opinion, are in danger of being a victim of the next pandemic when it comes, and it may be actually deadly or virulent. They'll catch all of the people that didn't really believe in it and get them sick. But not only that, all of the people that already bought into it will feel justified that they've been saying that everybody's conspiracy theorists and don't pay attention to data and don't pay attention for yourself. But I think on round two, when this comes to light of the trickery and the fakery that they do to the public, people are going to start getting mad. And I think that will be the point in which they've planned the massive food shortages. And you've already seen places like Jordan and other places in the Middle East. So the food rioting has started a little even earlier than I thought. I thought it would be like in the spring. But there are several countries already going into panic mode because of lack of food. And when you see it in the third world, it necessarily can expand into what we consider the first world. And I think Europe's going to be the first taste of feeling this. And then they're going to transition over into wartime. And let's see here. I was going to show the audience right here an article from Zero Hedge. China's breathtaking nuclear expansion confirmed. Beijing officials cite fear of U.S.-led regime change. And you can see that they've already made a pact with Russia. So if any kind of major military conflict goes down, they will be allied. But I've been seeing all the signs of a genuine move towards war. You have Putin's defense minister died suddenly of a heart attack, and that's kind of commonplace these days, to all of a sudden have a massive heart attack. Anyway, they suspect foul play in that. You also have this British soldier that was caught by the Russians, so there's a British involvement there. You have this cruiser that just sank in the Black Sea there, that supposedly was shot by a Ukrainian missile. So there's another escalation. And then Russia straight up threatens nuclear war deployments if Sweden and Finland go through with joining NATO, like that they claim that they will do in the next couple of weeks. And then you also have something that I think is being overlooked right now, and that is the situation in North America. I actually think that we're about to see some kind of major conflict on the southern border, and I've been thinking that for a while. And now the headlines are following suit with my theory, if I can find the right articles here.
Well,
but
Ransom, can I cut you for a second here?
Yeah, absolutely.
So staying sort of in the same vein, what's running in tandem is also this whole narrative messaging of everywhere you look. You can't even crack open even one website without a story about disruption, shortages, supply chain bottlenecks, whatever it is, shipping shutdowns. It's programmed into, they're getting ready for the collapse, because see how it's almost taking on a life of its own through the media, through the people. It seems like that's the play, is throw the narrative out that they want, and then people manifest it in the third dimension here because everybody's thinking about it so much. So that's why you say when everybody seems to march lockstep, well, it seems like a new twist in reality created by us, the viewer of the news, whether you report on it, analyze it, believe it, try to disprove it, whatever it is, it's in the discussion of being And once billions of people start thinking about that thing being real, perhaps then something shifts and it becomes that part of, we've manifested it into our reality. Because everywhere you see, there's something about shortages. And then if everybody's focusing on that, guilty as charged, myself reporting on it, then what? Does it turn into the reality around us? Or could everybody say, no, I don't believe that? But I mean, how many percent is that? So small, smidgen, beyond a smidgen of a smidgen. But something's going on with the explicit narrative of, like you say, those right angle changes all the time in lockstep. You know, if we trace it back, I bet we could see how we've gotten from there to here through all the news of the narratives have brought us to manifest our own worlds out to this point right now. A little woo-woo, but I'm willing to go there tonight, you know. Cosmic rays in the house.
Yeah, and they are bombarding us. I agree with that because they only seem to have really three topics that they push now. I mean, like, you could go through the channels, and of course your left-wing channels will be, talking about the same exact topics that they always talk about. And you go to the right-leaning ones, they will be talking about the same exact topics that they usually talk about. And you get trapped in the left-right paradigm, even if you know about it, so you're aware of it, but you still get trapped in it. But the thing that I'm seeing is that they let certain stories slip through the cracks that you're not supposed to pay attention to. But then when they're ready to bring it out of the occult into the open, they bombard the internet in lockstep, like you said, with a bunch of articles kind of letting you know where they're about to go. And that's kind of my point. Nothing really super bad can happen to the United States unless there's a real a force behind creating unstable, country for us. If you've seen in other countries, it's been a standard practice to first, embargo, sanction, then bomb, and then, it's full of war, and then it's completely destabilized. Well, even if, gas skyrockets, and even if the supermarkets collapse, Americans are pretty, we have a good history of being handy with tools, being able to get over it, as they say, pull your bootstraps up and you pull yourself up, and I think Americans can actually do that as long as there's not a real destabilizing force. Now, hunger will be a destabilizing force, but I don't think it's enough to push us over the edge here. So what you need is an influx of people, and an invasion in a way, and they're doing that right now at the same time as they're trying to lock down the citizens. So you see this happening at the same time, and then this headline from the Washington Post: "The war next door, conflict in Mexico is displacing thousands." And if you really look into this, this is prime example of something exactly like what's going on in the Ukraine, where you have basically rich, you could call them boss hogs or warlords or cartel bosses or whatever you want to call them. The same thing's happening in Eastern Europe. And what happens is NATO, UN, and the CIA, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they get a hold of these little groups, and then they start playing them off to destabilize a country. I don't think that they really need to destabilize Mexico, because they've done a good job of that with the drug war. But to really get at Americans, first you hit them with the food, which is similar to what we've done to foreign countries as far as, sanctions, and then, embargoes where you can't get the food in there. And what necessarily follows those two steps, which is the same thing time and time again, is some kind of actual kinetic displacement of people that increase the fear of everyone. But then you have this going on, and then in the backdrop, like I said, you see the actual world superpowers posing to re-slice up the map. And I think that the majority of these countries already have been infiltrated by what, some people call globalists, and they're moving together in one order. And I think the only thing that's stopping them right now is they're not sure which faction is going to be in charge of the communist changeover. So we're kind of in a bubble here in the U.S. as far as we still have time and the capability to gather resources, learn new skills, increase your knowledge about certain topics that you might need to move forward without money. So like right now, I've been just for the past 2 years, I've been gathering free lumber, free blocks, free everything, free seeds, free this, free that. When Home Depot was throwing away all their plants that they couldn't sell, I voluntarily would drag them all out of the trash and take them home and replant them and try to give them a new home. Half of them didn't live, but the other half produced, tomatoes and vegetables all year, and I didn't spend any money. I know that everybody can't do that, but what you can do is start exploiting the resources that you have around you that you wouldn't necessarily pay attention to, like free metal, free wood, free blocks. You can do all kinds of stuff with these things on top of, getting your tool supply together so that you can actually do a variety of actions. Because the difference of having just a small collection of good tools and not having tools is the difference between having anything or eating or doing anything productive at all. So like some of these things that we could start lining up while we're watching the world kind of fall apart and set itself up for a world conflict. We know from the past that the only way people ever survived these major conflicts is they kind of stayed in bubbles and they used agriculture to survive. I would like to mention that there's a famous guy, I forgot what his name was or anything, but he said, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And I totally think that's a real philosophy, but you could expand that to be, any tradesmith you could think of, on top of just trying to, watch these patterns that the government is doing so that you can keep up to date with the next step that they're going to do. And we pretty much know by this winter, they're going to bombard the public with problem after problem after problem to just completely keep them distracted. And it's really funny. I know I brought this up last time, but notice how many politicians are getting sick and disappearing and are not able to face the music, so to speak.
Well, that's a lengthy list. But again, you have to look at, the ancient, let's go back to the, circa 1500. And as the society moved through and started to experience one of these cycles, as we know now, islands fortified themselves and things we go to as tourists now. They run into Croatia or wherever you're going. There's citadel cities. It seems like people have lined up like that. And anywhere you go across Europe, everything was, fortified. Now, traditional history tells us fortified against once battling kingdoms or whatnot. You just have to wonder how this is going to pan out. As we understand, we're at the cusp of the cycle again. So if we go through, late 1500s into the early 1600s, things were getting a little shaky at the very end. They're the same things. The economy was starting to be debased with, inflation of the time and gold being lent out that was not, and there were gold runs on certain facilities. Like, you go to a small town and there was always a person who had the gold, and then, there'd be a run in a regional area on that. I mean, it's just repeating a chapter in history. And then they entered the grand solar minimum and the Maunder minimum, say 1640. And that's really when it all changed. The food was not as available to the populace because it was more difficult to grow because the planting and harvest seasons were out of sync, much like it is today. But this is a global society, so if you know that this year's harvest is going to be probably the lowest in 100 or 200 years, at least 100 years. So you have to look at the variables. How much was really going to be lost from electromagnetic changes sweeping through our solar system, shrinking our atmosphere slightly, 32 miles, compressing it. And then jet streams out of flow, cloud cells moving to new destinations, and then a mix-in of geoengineering and different types of auroral heating. And then, what does that mix in itself? Combined with the fertilizer shortages, the herbicide shortages, and now the Black Sea restrictions and limits of exports from that region that supplies 30% of the grain. That's where we're at right now, all that happening. So as we progress through these next few months, very specific timelines. So you see the distractions in the news. How are we being played It seems like the next greatest distraction is the next scariest thing, World War III. Well, how about global famine, even those of us in the States? Which one's scarier? A couple nukes that'll eventually blow off in the wind? Because you got to think 2,000 plus nuclear explosions over the last, since 1950, let's say 70 years, we've blown off 2,000 nuclear weapons above ground, at least here on this planet. 2,000 plus. So 2 or 3 more, whoop-de-doo. But if it's on a city center, ouch. But how about a global famine where you're going to eat your neighbors? We're going to move back to exactly what I'm referencing here, the 1500s, when there were citadels and everybody was fortifying all of what they had or what they were storing. It's almost as if, cities are going to be their own controlled chicken nests in there, if you will. Everybody gets a little tiny square roost. And then those in the countryside, they're going to form these same citadel walls around their communities. But everything that's happening right now was already inbound in a natural cycle anyway. And see, the elite globalists, whatever you like to call them, had to have excuses for all of this leading up to this time. So this is the distraction we're getting now. And I'm even wondering, is this a human? Oh, there's some lightning out. I could just hear that. Because a lot of these actions being taken right now are non-human actions. So you have to look, what was something, were we invaded by a different consciousness or something like this? Because it does seem this cycle repeats itself every 400 years. But then, there's more powerful combinations of those cycles. So once in a 2,000 year. Would it be 5 of those once in a 2,000 year? It would be 8 or 9. Some of these sacred numbers that keep coming around again and again, 8 or 9 times 4 is 3,600 years. A lot happened 3,600 years prior, but we're really not privy to much of that information any longer. But whatever's happening in the way that the world's being moved, citadels and, ringed, fortified cities are going to be the way to go. I do believe it's happening so fast, blink of an eye, this May planting season will realize that they didn't grow enough corn. And the corn being the most important thing for ethanol and cattle feed and chicken feed, pigs, hogs, dairy cattle, feeder cattle, doesn't matter. And then all the products that go into stores and supermarkets and things. Like all that's, if you only grow 10% of the normal corn, but the acreage is the same because it switched to beans, it doesn't matter. Like you could drink all the soybean oil you want to, but where's the corn? So this is the kind of world we're entering right now. Like really at this point, May will be a very huge wake-up call for most people about looking on the backside at the harvest season, what's not going to be there. Then you could squawk all day long and say, yeah, man, they could just keep it out and they have all these extra stores and everybody's prepared their fertilizer and everyone. No. A very small percentage did, as of any society. There's always prepared people. So those farmers that bought their fertilizer last year and bought their herbicide last year and got it at a really, was considered bargain price back then, just regular price. Should they not reap the benefits to be able to plant because they saw the foresight to get all the farm inputs that they would need because they saw in the future it would rise? Well, I'm just saying next year it's not going to be available. So as we move through this year, the realization of the amount of food that will not be grown will shock everybody. First, it's going to shock the markets, but then it is going to shock the moms. Because look at that. There's already infant formula rationing going on. Oh, wait, I don't mean rationing. I mean limit of 2 purchase or limit of 3 purchase, depending on the vendor you go to. But notice how the media has turned it into rationing. That just came out last week, the word rationing in the headlines talking about infant formula. Now, every mother's going to pick up on that. And instead of saying, oh, there's a limit of 3 that you can buy in the Walgreens of infant formula, they're like, rationing in Walgreens. Talk about ramping up the fear of sliver. You know where it's going. It's going to get thin. So as you alluded to in the beginning, food shortages will be used to control the populace further. Yes, I agree. Digital rationing cards, central bank digital currency. carbon allocation credits and whatnot will all be associated with this same digital platform.
And you notice that you bring up this idea that it's, non-human things. Almost everything about what's been going on as far as governmentally has been, anti-human. I mean, you could pick an industry and there's stuff to talk about there. But you brought up this non-human thing, and you could skip through what used to be considered kooky, tabloid stuff, and now it's coming from I wouldn't consider the Sun mainstream, but every time I see an article in the Sun, I then see it on MSN and I see it on CNN. And basically, this is exactly what that they're pushing the idea. And that's kind of what I was talking about before, is they only have 3 avenues that they're feeding us now. I was watching a video earlier from TruthStream media, and they were pointing out what happened to the rest of the internet. And I've talked about this a lot of times too. The internet used to be a gigantic place, but now it's internet ghettos. There's echo chambers. It's hard to get your message out. It's hard to find new information now, and everything is controlled. And then it goes back to, what are the 3 things that they're feeding us? Hunger, war, and aliens. And it sounds silly, but all of the avenues of government are now starting to let out this idea that you should get used to the idea of aliens. And then when you think about this biometric digital identification system that they want to implement worldwide, while simultaneously reducing the population, according to them themselves, you start looking at these articles as not too far-fetched, like this one, From the Beyond. Aliens' first contact could destroy religion and spark a global chaos if ever they came in peace, warns ex-MOD, that's the Military of Defense investigator. That's I'm sure you've seen this guy on TV, Nicholas something, Nick Pope. But the point is that it's the same message, and everybody always refers back to the Brookings Institute's little book that they wrote for NASA, that if astronauts came across anything extraterrestrial, that they were, bound into secrecy. Because why? Because the monopoly of control would dissolve. They don't word it that way, but that's essentially the fear, is that the structures, the fabric of society would dissolve, religions, government, and all of these things. But wouldn't it be a neat weapon to use against the population, if you already have a failing system, is to throw this idea in there as just one of many things to blame a certain time period on, and how the transformation of wealth and power happened. When you look back and say, oh yeah, well, they had the war, and they had the COVID, and they had the alien contact, and that's why all of those people died in a real short time period within 50 years. Because even if you get into mathematics, we're going to plateau on our population anyway. And then you start adding in all these other things that limit the lifespan, so to speak, of people, like sudden heart attacks. But then you just scroll through the news, like you said, they even want you to get used to nearby extraterrestrial life. Like and this article talking about alien life probably exists on Jupiter's moons. This is all stuff that probably you and I, as our interest as even children, we're probably already reading all these theories and ideas long ago before the public, but now it's mainstream, and it's not even looked down upon, in the same way that for decades the U.S. government used to alienate and make fun of people and dismiss and call it whatever, swamp gas or whatever. Now they're not doing that. They're saying, yeah, we found some extraterrestrial material. Here's the documents. Well, actually, they didn't actually say that. What they said is they found crashed saucer-shaped, craft. So they didn't actually allude exactly that it was an extraterrestrial. But you see this, you got the Tic Tac videos, all of these other videos, they're verifying, declassifying. And then here, lost in this article about this guy that's super corruption, involved in counterintelligence, ousted as a bad guy, sex, lies, and UFOs. Pentagon's head of counterintelligence gets busted for doing all kinds of dirty stuff. But if you look in here, he's closely, tied up with the UFO program, the DoD's quasi-secret. They even use the word quasi-secret because it's not really secret anymore. So now they're just shoveling these factoids in our face. At the same time as they're delivering us doom and gloom, and they give you all these other avenues. It's just, in my opinion, these are, whether extraterrestrials are running things or not, or they're coming or they're not coming, it's really, regardless, because they have these avenues of scapegoatism where at any turn that the public turns against them or catches on to their plans, they can always just throw another one of these little curveballs out where it takes people months or years to figure out the truth, kind of let the dust settle like it did with 9/11. We're 20 years past that, and the majority of the public in the United States still says things like, I choose not to believe. And you could choose not to believe all you want. You can choose not to believe the president of the United States when he says that, food shortages are going to happen. And you could choose not to believe the headlines that are talking about rationing and food shortages and all of these problems. But regardless of aliens or World War III, if you're in a place where you're not immediately being killed, it doesn't matter if it's aliens or war or whatever, as long as you are, in balance with your little area of nature in a way. And so you can kind of ignore that, because what power do you really have over this gigantic thing, except for that power of manifestation that you talked about before, and which that if everybody believes all their stories and everybody's lock and step afraid of everything and everybody takes all the same measures, what you have basically is a colony, a hive mind, not unlike insects. And is that not alien to the human lifestyle? How much more alien do you need to get than mass surveillance, tracking, rationing, and to put it lightly, the culling of unnecessary populations around the world. And they do that very strategically, but one common theme from Rome all the way to Kissinger is use food as a weapon, and you see that right now with picking a conflict, using the world powers in a proxy war right there in the Ukraine to disrupt 30% of the world's grain output. And what better way as a next step, in my prediction, is that they'll have some kind of southern border crisis here soon that is going to explode and be the blame of Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona not producing the same amounts of food. And you'd be amazed how much food Texas alone produces, not only for the world, but for the United States.
Yeah, and you have to think California as well. I mean, that's another large one. You're talking about insects, man, something invading the planet. Don't call me a bug-eyed dude, because, insects have bug eyes, but they want you to convert to eating insects now. Are there intelligent insects and then just insects from Earth? I'm not sure. Something does seem a little strange the way the world's being constructed, though. It's almost as precision demolition of the economy and all the supply chains and everything involved with that to create the most chaos possible after every step is accomplished. Because you look at this, it doesn't seem as speedy as it is, but it seems that every maneuver that's done creates more chaos, more shortages, more inavailability, and you can see it just being constricted. It's almost like a boa constrictor. I watched this special on boas invading the Everglades not too long ago. And the way they constrict slowly, it's as if a constrictor has taken over our economy, our world. But again, when you look at something like the serpent, would that not be the same? What's real interesting, though, is one invasive species that nothing feeds on can then pervade and take over an ecosystem. So the pythons that are down there, yeah, they catch them, they get paid by the foot for the hunters and whatnot. They're not really that tasty. I mean, you can try to cook them up. But it's one species that dominated because there was no other, predators in that area for it. And I'll take that onto the spiritual sense, where if in global control of all narratives, media, movies, and messaging across all airwaves, including what is now the internet, was done to take away your ability to vibrate at a certain level on a spiritual frequency that would absolutely, as in a hunter sense, make them flee out of terror or whatever that is, that they're going to be pinned to a corner and some sort of frequency will evaporate their souls or something, the way they're looking at it. Because the dominant species in Florida right now is definitely the python. Nothing else. It wipes out entire ecosystems because there's no predator for it. But if your positive vibration, your vibration of love, and the things that we should be doing as a human race is completely constricted and at zero or near zero, then again, a super predator can emerge. So it's almost a question of the chicken or the egg. Was it the super predator, different consciousness being on this planet that then in turn started to change things? Or is it the opposite, where we've changed it and now it becomes obvious that you can see the different vibration right in front of us daily? Where this has taken us is using the human mind and the resonance field against us so it doesn't exist, or it's at a very low level. So these predatory vibration entities can stay here in the same dimensional space on the crust of our planet with us. Because, you always hear these stories of old, of somebody was going to be burned, or they roped somebody up or whatever. You go back into the times and these vibrations of love and light would extend out of them, and suddenly the people, the perpetrators, would flee, even though they were going to murder or do whatever. They would flee, almost clutching their ears like, no, that sound of love. It hurts. I got to get, I can't take. We're in a very strange place at the moment, and as these frequencies change on the sun, and I don't know if anybody felt strange energies today, because we had a massive, massive solar flare hit the Earth. It was literally off the charts of density per cubic centimeter of plasma that just slammed through. Now, most of it was directed over toward Europe, and it's ongoing right now, and it should be tapering off probably about 7 a.m. here Eastern time. But if you're feeling some different energies tonight, what has been happening in the news lately that would take your energies away from this in the last 3 days? Because when we're looking at this solar flare, the amount of energy delivered onto our planet from this very small, what was considered prior, you go back to the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, you look at this kind of flare, it wouldn't have even barely sent any auroras down. But look at a KP index of 7, purple on the chart, you just never see that. So there's all this extra cosmic energy coming in, literally cosmic energy and physical plasma energies pervading our planet at a much greater rate now. So think about that. The vibration of the human frequency is changing too. So these, whatever you want to call them, entities in a different consciousness that are on our earth with us, the human spirit is arising to actually get to that point where, you start beaming out love and they run and hide as they're being, like a vampire seeing light. Think about your vibration of love or whatever high frequency you can get to, if it's happiness or gratitude or whatever it is. That vibration is literally like sunlight to a vampire, because they exist in such a low density of frequency, in such a low state of vibration, that for us to even get up to just feeling happy in a day is almost too much and would overthrow their power on the planet, especially if everybody was at that same vibration level. So what do we see? 3 days before here, this was already predicted. As soon as it came off, it was an Earth-directed CME. Go back 3 days prior, and right this second, when everybody's absorbing news, this is when the solar flare hits. Like, how are you feeling today? It's a bit weird that a major news headline overlaps with energies that have not been seen since, say, the 1980s in terms of how powerful this storm was on top of our planet right now. And then what is the news deflecting from at the same time with these energies to amplify the negativity? I don't know, but it's really interesting timing how as soon as that solar flare happened, giant things, the news happened, and they're overlapping at this moment. So it's all about the frequency you're putting out. And I think we've been led and farmed and controlled and deluded into not using our power. Now something oversees this planet.
That's really funny the way that you put that about the, like they're running from the positivity, because there's a weird thing that they do with these TikTok videos and viral videos where they use the same audio from another video on multiple videos, and basically what it is any video where someone comes up and the animals or the people start running away, and then they dub over this guy from another viral video that's like, stop, wait, don't you have a minute to talk about your Lord and Savior? And wait, don't run, right? And they show it over these iguanas and like cattle and all of these other things, and they play that same clip. It made me think of that, because it seems like, if you really get out and start talking with people and you start telling them small talk, you start talking about the world events, it won't be long before someone takes a side or gets offended or hurt or whatever, any topic you want. But you'll find a weird reaction if you go start talking about positive stuff, like what they could do. You'll get people excited, some people, and then the other people will actually get angry, like you said, and it's like they're afraid of you because you're telling them good things that are true, like it's a poison to them, the positivity that you're outputting. And this is where you get the term haters, because some people literally loathe and are afraid of people that produce and are positive, and the kind of people that even though bad things happen, they'll just get up and start looking at the bright side of it and what they could do to adapt to the new situation and still come out on top. Because like you were talking about, the predator, for a long time, human beings have enjoyed being the top predator on this earth. But does that really make sense to you if you look through like all of nature throughout history? Every predator, even the top predators, have always eventually come across predators, and they had to adapt or they wouldn't be here. And you used a great example, like a python, and you got sharks and the Canaan crocodilian type of animals. And all of these animals have been around on the earth through multiple extinctions of different types of animals, and possibly even civilizations. I mean, because we really don't know. The time periods are so massive and so big that, without specific, that's a reason that they think there might have been possibly a civilization on Mars is because there's certain isotopes that kind of only develop if you've had a technological situation that has reached a certain point in technology. They start putting off these certain isotopes, and there's literally scientists right now digging through the fossil record and different stuff looking for that exact thing, which makes you wonder if there's people looking for it. Do they have some kind of knowledge that we don't have for sure, that they know that there was a technological civilization? And if you look at all of these ancient pre-Diluvian societies and myths like Atlantis and things like that, you know that there must have been something big enough to at least write stories about, even if parts of them are fiction. There was something big enough going on pre-flood, like a technological civilization. And I think that if there was such a leader or a control mechanism, then it might have taken them a large time to reset the clock, to gain that control back, if something was out of their hands, like a major flood on the planet. And now we're going into a time period that seems like it might be even a little more manageable for the elites to control people because of all of the massive chaos that they've created. And one of their favorite slogans from these elite people is order out of chaos. And that's what they are doing right now. We're in the chaos phase, so that they can have order. And this whole idea of extraterrestrials seems like it's reaching a point where it's more accepted than fictional. And you have to look at the governments and religions of the world. They're all preparing for this message. So are they just fanciful thinking, or are they literally testing the waters to see if they can expose the true nature of what runs things? And if you look into any of these ancient mystery schools that have now turned into secret societies in modern times, a lot of them believe exactly that a new age is coming, and this will be their age, of the age of the people that have held the occult knowledge for so long. And one of the things I did in 2019 was predict that in 2020, because of it being 2020, and you know how they like to play on these numbers, that would be the year of clear vision, where the occult became out in the open. And that's exactly what they've done the last couple of years, even though they're still with the mind games as far as the fear porn. And this is the sad thing, is their fear porn turns real if they need it to. That's the bad thing about it. So just ignoring it altogether is not the answer, but being aware that they manipulate your feelings. And I'm a true believer in this idea of manifestation and positive energy, which means if you believe in that, then you also have to believe if they're sending out a message to massive amounts of millions and millions of people, they can manifest things simply by controlling the message. And that's kind of what we're doing here, is you need to break the mold of the message they're giving you.
What does that involve? Turning off the TV and not only choosing what you want to watch, but then you get back into that whole, are you stuck in your own echo chamber again? Because you're only resonating with what resonates with you. Thinking about using time wisely to get away from the tube and the programming, learning something that you can grow, harvest right now in the springtime. Abundant. There's an enormous amount of nurseries. Everything's out right now. If you're going to plant anything, everything's available right now. This is the most that you'll ever get for the whole year that's available right this second. So, I would be out this weekend getting what I could to learn to grow what I need to. Whether it's straw bales or getting a blueprint from somebody who did, like I say, edible gardens that already knew it and perfected the edible garden. Follow this blueprint, plant that there, plant this here, do that. In a long enough row at 12 feet or whatever, and then you can just walk through and eat what you need all year. It's going to take solutions like this, people getting ready enough to experiment with things, because if you can't see it in the headlines, every time you turn around, it's another record price or some kind of thing that is so bizarre and so unexpected as something that would occur. But it seems it's starting to snowball, and by the time you even blink to kind of absorb it mentally, it's already on to the next biggest thing. We're like, whoa, that would have been a whole week's headline before. And now it's like a thing that popped up in the morning. But I'm saying, wherever you're looking at, you're going to need to get your own food preps up in terms of storing some and then growing some. I think time's limited. So, when Rance and I come back this next hour here, I want to talk a little bit about timelines, because I'm interested in what he thinks in terms of when this might onset, because I'm looking at an enormous amount of people I consider smarter than myself. And everywhere I look, I don't care where it is, there's all timelines within the next few months to the harvest season where something's definitely going to shift and rip the threads of our society and our civilization. So what comes first on that? Is it going to be some sort of economic thing? Is it going to be a supply chain thing? Is it going to be a war thing? Is it going to be a solar flare thing? Oh, that was a giant solar flare that just passed today. I mean, what is it that's going to bring us up? Plague 2.0 here? Is there going to be one that's really stronger? Because you said, Ransom, maybe there'll be something that'll double strong and everybody like, yeah, not again, whatever, but it'll be something stronger. But it always seems to be released to get this response. So, timelines. Talk about that when we come back. Thanks for joining us. Dave Dubine here. Thank you, everybody on Rumble. Thank you, everybody on Twitch and on YouTube. Appreciate your time with us tonight. Also here, Revolution Radio. We'll be back in a couple minutes. Ransom Godwin and myself coming back. Timelines for 2022.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
on Studio B at freedomslips.com.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Galactic Interstellar Council on Revolution Radio Studio A, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Join us as we traverse the starseed paradigm, as expressed in the time-space continuum that we know as the divine expression of love and light. Integrating this conscious unity into the galactic paradigm. So welcome all, both terrestrial beings and galactic beings as one. So be it. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at buyer risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
And welcome back for the second hour of Mini Ice Age Conversations. David Dubine right here with Ransom Godwin, 420 TB Freedomist Films on the dial. Tonight we're streaming on Rumble, Twitch, and YouTube with the live feed right here at Revolution Radio, Studio A, 10 p.m. to midnight every Thursday. So running costs and all these things for production costs of expanding. Consider a donation as we move through the evening. And if you're over at Revolution Radio, it's right at the top there. And for the other people who are listening, we're going to go through timelines. If you value this, support us, follow us, share the message, share the vids. So here's I'm going to go first. I'm going to give my timeline and assessment, and then Ransom, I was hoping I could ask for your timeline and assessment also. Then we'll just kind of compare them, because I have a couple specific months that I wanted to mention, and then I want to see if what you're reading in the media or what others are listening to, thinking out there, if it matches with what they're seeing also. And in terms of global awareness that food is not really going to be as available at the end of the year or during the year or sometime that's going to upset an already upset economy. So here we go. At the end of May, farmers will be pretty much done planting across the entire United States. Now you might want a cup of hot chocolate with this one. Now as they do the reporting on what was planted or what was not planted, the shell game is going to occur here, where USDA in the beginning will say, look, it's the same. Well, wait, we lost about 20. Okay, we lost about 15% of total planted acres in America weren't planted. But by the way, they switched over to soybean because the fertilizer and herbicide going into corn, it was too expensive or not available, and they just didn't plant enough corn this year. There's going to be a massive corn shortage globally, and you're going to watch the commodities markets spike. And I still stay with my call. I was called insane and like scoffed at and eyes rolling for calling $20 wheat this year. I can't wait to see them again later in October and be like, what up? $20 wheat stands, and then corn $30. Beans, I think, are going to drop in price because everybody's growing beans. So, I mean, it's going to be a flood, a tidal wave, just like a Himalayan-sized pile of bean at the end of the year, and almost no corn. So the realization after the farmers plant is going to be one thing. Okay, then they can do simple math and say, all right, there's not going to be this much corn. And then you start to look at the industries affected most by corn. And this will take us through July. And people are going to get the awareness of during this 2 months, like the news media is going to run with that. Corporate news is going to run with that. Agricultural news is going to have a bunch of stories. And it'll be kind of like what we're seeing today. Supply chain shortages, bottlenecks is going to be through all news feeds and media about not enough corn being planted by the middle of July. So everybody that sees a supply chain shortage, oh, there's breakdown here, oh, shipping's not here, you're going to understand what glyphosate is and what GMO corn seeds are if you don't already, and silos, and you're going to hear all the terms. And that's all that's going to be in the news by July, that there's not enough corn, and everybody will know what not enough corn means, like not enough ethanol, not enough animal feed. Oh, you're supposed to eat insects anyway, man. And everything that we use for high fructose corn syrup, which I hate that stuff. It just does not sit well with me. Literally, it makes me, I don't know, agitates me when I have high fructose corn syrup. Skin gets kind of itchy. But that kind of material is in almost everything that's used across the entire manufacturing chain of food and bev, drinks, boxes, supermarket goods. And if it's not that, it might be a byproduct of, okay, corn flour or some, thickening agent. How about eggs? Because if there's not enough corn, you don't get the eggs, but almost everything uses eggs. So now you're starting to get in this downward spiral, and look at, there's an egg apocalypse. That's today's video. It's already live if you want to go check it out. No, stay with us. Check it out after the stream here. Goes into the egg apocalypse. Now, this is all going to be happening in those 2 months between May and July. Everything you're hearing about now, eggs, you don't have enough eggs, you can't do this in the factory. You're going to hear about a lot of factory stoppages and slowdowns and shutdowns and non-availability of products in supermarkets based on the fact they can't get the corn syrup or whatever, corn flour, thickening agents, whatever, plus, egg shortages, and it's going to dovetail. Okay, that's going to spook the populace. Right now there's rationing on baby formula, by the way, ding, 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 bell. Rationing on baby formula this week across all United States, apparently now. It was just Walgreens. Now it seems to be happening everywhere. During COVID, it was limited 1, limited 2. Everybody was okay, it's limited 1. But now they changed the word to rationing. So we can kind of see where this is going already. They're drip feeding the word rationing to get you ready to ration. Ration what? Well, it's going to be rationed whatever corn is a derivative of or involved in the process of. So you can already see the chain of where it's going. And that whole realization is going to come between May and July. And it'll be 2 months of nonstop narratives in the media about this particular subject. Look for it. And then as we come into July, middle of July or so, they go out and do these crop tours. This is the mid-grow season, and when the crop tours are there and these guys are looking around with their binoculars and there's nothing out there. Oh, it's all stunted growth. Damn, I don't even know if we're going to get any grain head out of this one. Oh. At that point, that's going to be the next shock. So July is another one. And then obviously when we come into the harvest season and they really start to see that, oh my, it's far less than it was expected. And there's, food nationalism happening everywhere. At this point, you got the globalists have a couple options, another virus or take people to digital rationing cards, central bank digital currency, because the economy would have imploded. You can't buy, food that's 3 or 4x and then your gasoline's doubling and, interest rates are increasing. It just doesn't work like that. So that's where I see the coming into October, and the realization of what's going to happen in October is the way things are being deconstructed on purpose now. It's very laser-like precision of the deconstruction of the economy and everything, shipping and logistics that keeps all of the other systems moving. I mean, it was a tightly oiled machine there until now, where they're just pulling out different Dobbs, Niles, cogs are getting removed. Okay, let's see what happens. But it's all very purposeful to bring us to this point in October. So when it does come with Scrimpy Harvest, people are going to start raiding the warehouses and the storage facilities where food is. And then there's going to be a lot of high-profile robberies of, 18-wheelers rolling into a food storage facility, and then they're going to start to station troops in the countryside because it's for our protection over the food supply, which is so diminished now because of fill in the blank. And then, you're going to have to get onto a digital ration card now. Oh, we need troops in the supermarkets because there's too many riots, people stealing food, fist fights, gunfights, knife fights, whatever, in the supermarket, because there'll be a lack of available foods, and that mother needs that food. And she's going to be battling with somebody else who needs that food. And it's the perfect guise to usher in everything else that didn't get initiated during COVID. And see, here it comes right now. I'm telling you, it's a timeline. October is when it starts again to try to get everybody on these digital ID systems, because then it's going to be about food and having money and access to money when the economy is collapsing. And maybe you'll even get a few personal allocation carbon credits out of that too, if you're lucky, if you're a good boy or girl.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to be a good boy or a good girl because, I don't want to take part in their system. I do
timeline. Sorry, I got distracted on that rant there. What's your timeline for the year moving through? That I showed you mine.
Yeah,
maybe it took a little bit longer than I wanted to, but that's kind of my timeline.
No, I think we're actually fast approaching a short timeline that you can put in the next couple of years, and I think it has to do with the classic. What do they call that? The presidential election cycle. If you've ever got into that, that stocks go up and then they go down in between the 2 years that the president is a president, and then they go back up, and people usually make their money, and most of the world moves are done at the beginning or shortly after and right before presidential elections because of how they do their business of trying to lay down things that will be permanent after them. But anyway, what I see going on right now is a very short timeline that basically ends in the presidential election of 2024, where we'll be all totally submerged in what they're calling the Great Narrative or the Great Reset, depending on, kind of which side you're looking at that. But both of those terms came out of the same people. And I want you to keep in mind that Klaus Schwab and their little global initiative have put out puppets worldwide. I mean, almost every single country. So what I predict over the next year is for hostilities to increase between Russia and the United States to the point of massive fear-mongering, shortages, and all of these other things that they'll say is because of the possible conflict. And I think what they're going to do is have an emergency treaty type thing happen right before 2024, where the United States, China, and Russia will all of a sudden get along because they're going to initiate this one world government by the year 2024. And I think you'll see it then. But first, they have to give us the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse before 2024. And what I mean by that is if you think about the things that are going on right now, you can count out the horsemen of the apocalypse. We have upcoming and currently right now war, pestilence, famine, and death there. So, you got these guys. I'm not Christian, but it's a good example of kind of like the 4 courses of the powers of the structure that they can use against the people. And that's what we have right now. And what we're going to be seeing, I think, all the way to 2024, increasingly around the world, they're going to have these food disruptions, which are going to increase tensions and all kinds of deal making. You're going to see countries realigning, but don't let them fool you. They're realigning for a one world government, because you can look back in history. We had the World War I to form the League of Nations. They didn't quite get what they wanted. Not everybody participated. So we had an even bigger death toll. And we had World War II, and we got the United Nations, and still yet there was holdouts, and they didn't get complete control on everything. They tried the Trilateral Commission strategy, which was a giant AFRICOM, AMERICOM, and a European Union, which they pretty much established that. And the last step would be to scare the wits out of everyone, have mass famine and a major die-off of populations worldwide to get people ready for the solution, which the solution is a worldwide implemented equality system in the name of equality and fairness and safety and security. They'll implement this worldwide thing. And I think what they're going to throw in there in between is some really horrible war, some massive food shortages, so a little bit of starvation. So you can see that on the 10 o'clock news. And then you're going to have some kind of plague. And any indication out of China is that they're going to repeat the last cycle and see think about how many billions of dollars they made off of masks. Just think about that. Mask, hand sanitizer have now been massively bought, more than any other thing in the last couple of years than it's ever been bought. I bet the people that own those companies and the people that planned out this have made mega billions on it. So what they're going to do is use their new money to put back into these global initiatives and these global leaders. And if you pay attention, what you're going to start seeing is scandal after scandal and sickness after sickness, and everybody that you could point a finger at in what's called government. And they're all going to go away in the next couple of years. You're just going to see it. And a major prediction I have is that Trump will run for 2024 all the way up until the end, and then he'll back out for health reasons. And then he'll just leave everybody hanging. And whoever you get, whether they're right or left, I guarantee you will agree to some kind of major agreement with China and Russia to save everybody from the famine and the war, and to stop terrorism, to stop the spread of plagues. And they will finally have a global prison planet with a digital identification system that has all your biometrics, banking, passports, everything that you think of as civilization that you need for civilization will all be incorporated into this. And I think they'll have it done by 2024. And in this time, while everyone's distracted, they're going to be blown away in 2025 while everything goes over to AI. And I mean everything: militaries, business, medical. And you're going to see it everywhere. You're going to see it at the transit stations. There'll be robots there, and more there will be something that people have taken for granted for decades is a thing called customer service and government accountability. Neither one of those things will exist by the end of 2023. And I think that even here in the United States in late 2023, you're going to see cutoffs of the EBT system causing starvation. And then to sprinkle it all on top of there, the weather's kind of crazy, or out of pattern, at least right now. And we're going to have a bunch of global events that will help this along. I think in 5 years, you won't even hear the term global warming anymore, because it's run its path and they've used it up, and now they're moving on to the next ones. And I really think that's where it's going, because I see all of this rearranging going on in Europe that I've seen before, in history. You think about all of these European countries are now taking their resources and putting it up into the war effort in Ukraine. And I'm talking about weapons, manpower, and military force. And Russia would have no choice, according to the script, to, combat that with their own escalation. And if we don't have a full-fledged, massacre of people to show the world, they will give us the, last minute of the apocalypse in 2024, and they'll set the clock back, and everybody will be used to the new system. And I know that sounds like a far-fetched future movie, but really all you have to do is just look at the amount of change in the past 2 years, and then compare that to the change in the last 10 years, and then compare that to the change in the last 20 years. And you'll see that we're going in an exponential rate to a singularity. And all in this, I think, is tied AI, because AI is the cornerstone of this new world. And what I mean by that is that after all of these other systems are collapsed and destroyed, they'll replace it with a worldwide AI system. And then, at that point, who is controlling the world?
Does that mean I can still go to Aruba? Thought the world was going back to normal.
As long as you get there before 2024, because if you're there in 2020, I think you'll be stuck there.
All right, man. Drinking the margaritas to the end of civilization. Bring on the mega volcano. Hey, one thing, though, Ransom, you mentioned EBT, but do the daily double on that and add Social Security as cutoff and payments at the same time. After all, they're both government systems. So imagine the chaos in society that would create if either one got cut off, but what if both get cut off at the same time? It was some sort of fill in the blank. It starts with a C. Cyber attack. Oh, yeah. Can you imagine the chaos that would cause? And then everybody would demand what? Another system that runs on AI that you lost everything because of the computer programs in the internet or at the banking facilities or at the government institution all went poof. And everything disappeared. It got hacked. It got something, and the cyber attack is no longer available. Everything digital disappeared. But then they want you to go to a completely 100% digital system. At least now we got some paper behind it. So if something breaks, you still got paper records occasionally in some places. But even that is going to go to zero. And now they want you to put the total trust and faith in everything, but it's going to collapse because of a cyber attack. But they want you to put all total faith in the new digital ID, facial ID cards. Again, that's a weird one.
I think they're
but looking out here in the edible landscape, I'm looking at plantains right now. So plantains, while we go through the next few weeks, they're everywhere. So you can get a free salad. You can dehydrate the leaves, make those into a powder. And, do a little study on plantain. Anyway, that's all I got to say, Ransom. I'm just ranting.
No, I thought it was funny because there's a video on, I think it's InfoWars, but anyway, they're talking about, what are the likelihood that we already live under alien hybrids? Because they point out all of these weird things. It kind of like what you said, everything they do seems to be anti-human, like we're being terraformed in a certain direction, like not just the environment, but the whole social class and what it means to be a human's being changed. And anyway, they were pointing out that, real similar, that there's these what you might call kooks or crazy people that think, there's already an alien hybridization program. And how would you even know if the aliens were already looking like humans so that they could be here and manipulate, and where would they fit in society? Well, they would fit in, obviously, if that were true, into elites, because they would be the only people with resources to keep their secret a secret. But when you think about that, people like David Icke have been kind of, with this theory before. I mean, I know his was reptilians, but it does seem to be that there is some kind of thing. You can call it aliens, interdimensional. You might even think it's to do with the occult and magic and stuff like that. But whatever it is, there seems to be a taint on the world elite and the people that run things, and they only want to go in a negative, dark direction. Because if you think at human society, it doesn't seem to be in the place that it should be. We started out, kind of supposedly as hunter-gatherers, and then we moved to agriculture. At that point, you would think that human beings would kind of realize their importance in the universe and start contemplating whether or not we're alone in the universe. And, if the possibility exists that we are indeed the example of the only conscious, highly intelligent life form in the universe, it puts a big burden onto us. And you would think that ancient man would have also had this epiphany that we may be the only ones to steer life in a certain direction for the future of existence. When you realize that connection and you think about ancient man starting its civilization with cultivating and agriculture, it kind of makes you wonder how we got so far off course where everything that we do is some kind of manipulation, pollutant, or using everything as a finite resource. And if you think back, armies have always done that, whether they knew that it was in limited supply or not. Empires have always used things to the max and acted like it was, infinite, that they could use it instead of a finite resource. And you would think that a long time ago, we would have figured out that agriculture and developing life, not only our life, because if you think about the choices you make, you control human evolution from a place of power that no one can really control, and that's your choices day to day. Every toxin that you eat, every bad thing that you do turns on and off these little things in your genes, your epigenetics. So in a way, you're driving your own evolution and the future of mankind with each decision you make. And once you have this epiphany, you realize that we're not the only ones along for this ride of evolution by choice. So are the plants and animals around us. So you wonder why ancient man didn't discover this and start taking every single plant and developing a culture in which not like necessarily worshiping nature, but respecting the potential of changing the environment and cultivating it along with us to its best. Its absolute best example of what it could be, from human beings to the food that we like, every single plant and animal that we've come across. You would think with this knowledge of our place in the universe, we would have done everything that we could to help the life around us express itself also in the best way, because it would be a symbiotic culture where we and the life around us coexist to where we help each other evolve. But something happened a long time ago that took us off into the death, destruction, and resource gathering of, not putting it back and viewing everything in the universe as a product that can be used indefinitely. So you got to wonder what event happened and what event keeps happening that every time we come to this epiphany. I think that we were about to probably around 2010, I think human beings were on the verge of their own singularity because they had the world's information at their fingertips in the internet. And now that there's censoring and embargoes on knowledge and forbidden thought and hate speech and wrong think, we're limiting our own potential mentally. But not only that, we're limiting the possibilities of us, evolving into the best creature that we could be. So if we acknowledge this every so often, there obviously is an equal and opposite force putting us back down. And I think we're at a point right now where it's maybe the first time in history where we're able or capable of completely seeing the bars around us and the manipulation. And then we can start moving into ignoring that lifestyle and going back to where we started. And the Great Reset actually should be healing our planet in a way that it benefits us and the planet at the same time. And I'm not trying to be like a super lefty or green tree hugger, but there is something to coexistence with these other life forms. They feed us, they nourish us, they medicate us. And obviously pharmaceutical companies and governments know this, and that's why they outlaw, control every single substance that comes out of nature. And then they weirdly exploit these compounds randomly and then find something that they could treat with it instead of working it from the opposite direction and finding things that already work. Instead, they seem to be trying to hold that knowledge back. I think it's been a failure overall, because there's always these niches of pockets of people that keep the knowledge. And I know we talked about this before, but it seems like we're about to go into a time where we need to create or recreate these secret schools, these schools of thinking, these schools of teaching sacred geometry to people, so that they can expand their mind and think about the possibilities of manifestation, because you can see it clearly with cultivation. And I think it's the best example. You could even call it a divine example of how you can manipulate and manifest your environment. I mean, because think about that, just with a few seeds, you can create something so beautiful and nourishing, and with less effort, easier, you can destroy things. And it seems like somewhere we got, turned off of this wrong course of the example of why we're here. And people are convinced that they need products and, all of these things when really they don't need that. Because, any individual knows that when the power goes off, there really is nothing valuable in their home except for, maybe a flashlight and whatever food you got that will go bad. And when you reduce your reality down to that, you realize that everything that people are doing, the most of it, 90% of it, is a wasted effort into pretty much a dead evolutionary branch on the tree. And that's super consumerism, super authoritarianism. And anywhere you see a limit coming from people, that's probably the wrong direction to go. And like right now, I was wondering, I don't know what they're doing in the cornfields, and I've never even grown corn except for last year. But this year, I already have at least 60 corn plants growing on my small little lot of various types of corn. Somebody sent me some Hopi Blue. I got all of this cool corn from the Oppenheimer Ranch that's supposed to be a mix of all the Native American corns put together. So it's kind of cold resistant, hot resistant, drought resistant. And it's got the genetics of all the original corns, or what was available. And now I'm planting it all over the place. It's going to be cross-pollinating. And I'm curious to see what one person and a handful of seeds, how many people can I feed? How much life can you create if you just went out every day and take away the idea of hoarding and preparing and all of that, and kind of think about, what are you doing for the universe? What are you manifesting each day? Like when you get up for the first 5 minutes of the day, what did you think about? What was important? What goals do you have? And I've been trying to change over to this lifestyle because I realized I chased the rabbit down the wrong hole when I was young and was distracted by a bunch of meaningless things. I realized that when I was in kindergarten, someone should have taught me how to grow food. They should have told me that I needed to acquire land. They should have told me that I needed to pick up a few skills, regardless of my education. Then that's how we should be teaching our kids now. Something like our founding fathers, where they not only were tradesmen, farmers, but they were also intellectual giants. And I think that we're at that point where we could be that if we steer manifestation back in the more natural direction.
Yeah, you asked what the goal for the day was. Well, for me, it was to learn about plantains, how to use them, the traditional uses, and then go harvest some for a salad for the dinner. That was my goal for the day. Okay, there's a ton of plantain out right now. And again, if you're going to want to feed yourself, in addition to planting something, you can find an enormous amount of edibles at this time of the year. Plantains. So eating it's one thing, and you can eat most of the plant. If it's a smaller one, you can even eat those stalks with the seed heads on them, leaves. But again, be careful if you're identifying something. I mean, I just know what a plantain looks like because it's so common, and just have known what it's been for like 20 plus years, even more, 40 years. I know what this plant looks like, what it is. Right. So for me, I can just go look at it and go, oh, that's plantain. But if you're not sure, make sure you double check, because if you're just starting out and you think, hey, that looks like a plantain, just double check. But in addition to being food and wild lettuces, that sort of thing that are up right now. And again, there's a ton of mustard everywhere. Those yellow flowers, there's a huge amount of leaves on the side of there you can just pick off and have for, the real nice, soft, supple leaves. You can make a salad out of those too. But I'm looking more at the medicine end of it. See, that's how a lot of things are, keeping us trapped as well. Just the very simplest of things, like saw palmetto for any kind of prostate thing. If you're down in the southeast U.S., further enough south, you can grow saw palmetto yourself. But then here's the thing, you need to make that into a powder. And then learn how to use some of your own medicines, and how do you powderize which part of the plant. Okay, well, I've been looking at plantains today. Spit poultice. Now, here's what it is. If you have insect bites, cuts, rashes, like a lot of rash you just can't get rid of, and then snake bites, which is real common right now. You're going to get a lot of insect bites, a lot of cuts, and a lot of rashes because you're just starting to work outdoors and in the garden. So those are the three things you're probably going to get: scraping yourself on something, cutting yourself on something, just something rubbing raw because you got the gloves on or, the new boots or whatever. Rashes on the hands. When you're clearing brush, you might get brushed by some poison ivy, whatever. But what you're supposed to do is the plantain that you could eat as a vegetable, just chew it up into a real, like they call it a poultice. They call it a spit poultice, chewed thoroughly, and then put it on your rash. Just chew it up. That should alleviate it. But this is even more powerful than what you consider like Benadryl cream or hydrocortisone cream. It's like wild lettuce, If you know anything about wild lettuce, that as a painkiller is equal, but without all the side effects as anything you can get out of a pharmacy. This is the same idea on the extreme uber of removing rashes and insect bite itches, scratchiness. So again, here's something for free. I'm out here cutting my yard today for the first time for the year to save the seed so then I can sprinkle that everywhere across my property and just get free seed from nature to regrass the entire area of the same grass, like just literally feet away. So obviously it's going to go pretty good 2 more feet away. But this as a medicine and a food is something entirely different, because in that process of harvesting my yard for grass seed, at the same time, I got insect bites, I got some cuts, and I got some rashes for trying to repair the mower in a couple places. I was always pushing against that plastic while I was, doing the ratchet or something. So right here's my medicine. Now, could I go buy a tube of something for $8 or $7? Of course I could. Or I could walk out 2 steps out of my front door or 5 steps and pick up a plantain. And if you use a juicer or whatnot, similar, put it in a small blender and just, or if you can chew it until it becomes that kind of paste, almost like green toothpaste, and then put it right on your cut. You're going to wrap it and just put it on the rash. And what is everybody's goals for the day? And what's the trigger to get people to movement? Because I don't know if it's intuitive or instinctive or, sixth sense or whatnot, or if it's, summer nights might not be as hot but it's cold in the, cold at night, but, summer days aren't getting as hot as they normally did. And there's some trigger where, everybody's going through something energetic right now. And, the current system, again, am I a result of the programming of what I'm supposed to manifest and talk about to get you to also think about it and believe that it's there? It's a lot of things are going to disappear off store shelves. So you're going to have to be more self-reliant. So again, here we go. Am I making something manifest in this dimension by talking about it and broadcasting this to the ears that are listening, and then they take it on and they start to believe it too, and then tell the next person, and then suddenly because they, you know what I mean? We talked about this earlier in the show, Ransom.
I messed up and I opened up the Twitch feed, so they got a little echo, but I fixed it. I asked everybody in the so you got some people watching on in the chat there on Rumble and also on 420 TV. Nobody knows about the Twitch because I just made one and started broadcasting to it. But I thought you were saying something last week about letting people ask questions. And since I got all the feeds open, I guess, they can ask you questions about like what you're doing. Because I'm curious, like today, I know that you probably go through the same thing. You have an idea, you go out, you work on it, and then immediately after it's done, or maybe the next day, you see some kind of flaw or problem with it, and then you have to come up with some way to, counteract that. Like the last couple of years, I was dealing with these lettuce fleas, I guess you call them, but there's a quick fix to that, and basically, I guess you just keep them in shade, and then they don't get to the high temperatures they need to lay all the eggs and everything. So what I was out doing today is putting shade over my boxes because I live in, the desert. I live by the border here, so there's a lot of sun, and as long as you keep everything watered, it'll grow big. But the problem is everything dehydrates in 15 to 20 minutes if you're not actively watching it all day. And I know that's a problem I have, is keeping everything hydrated because I live in such a hot, dry place that's sometimes windy. So today I went out and, I've tried the nets, the covers and the little hoop things. And where I live, the sun and the wind, that's really just not an option, because that material will turn into nothing in several months in this hot sun. And then, the wind will just rip it to shreds, and then you'll always be out there repairing it. So what I came up with is little short platforms, like, a couple 2x4s on each end of the flower bed, and then a couple of strips of wood on the top that are really securely on there, but there's big strips in between. So what that does, and I've discovered from just some accidental stuff, is that it allows the shade to slowly move over, giving your plants a break throughout the day as the sun moves across the sky. So it's not total shade, but it does prevent you from losing all your moisture. Now, that's like a problem I've found. I tried to deal with it. I failed, and now I'm pretty sure I have a good solution to that. So what are kind of some of the stuffs that you have? And I was going to let everybody ask questions so that they could ask you some stuff. But what are some stuffs that you've had to overcome that you thought was just going to be like an easy idea, like I'll just do this and that'll work out, because nothing ever works out like planned. So that's kind of what I was kind of put off to you. I'm sure with a lot more property, you're doing a lot more, so you're coming across a lot more of that.
Well, no, it's down to the basics of designing something close to the home that produces food, so you don't have to walk far on your property to go get your produce. You want to keep it, if you're talking about calories in, let's go back to the Great Depression, for example. Like, food was hard to come by, it was really expensive, and people lived on farms also and worked. But do you think they would expend the extra energy to put something 200, 300 feet away from the house, half a mile, 1,000 feet away? Or do you think they'd be putting it right there? So then when you start to plant things, it depends on how long you've been in your home or how long you've consciously noticed how the sun shifts in the morning when the sun rises and where the shadows cast, and then, where the sunlight and where that sun bends around plants or house or whatnot at which time of the day. So you're basically looking at everything as a giant sundial. So the tree, the big giant cedar tree out back, it casts a huge shadow, but it moves like a sundial. And so does the shadow of the house. So unless you're into that rhythm and you're looking at it and noticing it, when you plant, you might plant in the wrong place the first couple times because it didn't get enough sun. We thought it did, but it just didn't. Or it got too much. Or, that edge, there wasn't enough rainfall. It didn't actually drip directly on the plant line out there, so you got to water it. Pulling things further out from the house versus closer. And again, the yields you want to get, what are the companion plants? It's a little Rubik's Cube there of trying to plant things you like to eat, because it's useless to grow a bunch of things that you're not going to eat. Little things like now the wild onions are out everywhere, the wild garlic. So, that's just as an easy thing to pick out of the ground. And, you can supplement until you can get your own chives going or your own leeks or whatnot. But again, think about the things that are mainly used in cooking that are super easy to grow. So chives. But then again, if you wait long enough, you can get the onion portion under the ground. But I'm more talking about the green as it's growing. And with the thought process of growing things that even if you harvest a leaf or two off of each plant, they will keep growing. So if, let's say you have 50 plants out in your garden of certain types of lettuce, like let's say you have 5 different kinds of lettuces, and from each plant you can get 2 leaves. Well, by the time you go down those 50 plants, that's 100 leaves of lettuce. And they'll still continue to grow. You don't need to harvest the whole lettuce. So then you start to look and say, okay, we want to have microgreens in a lean time and lettuces if we can grow naturally. So you got to look at the nutrient balance too. The micronutrients, you're not going to want to grow iceberg lettuce because that has almost nothing in it. Whereas romaine lettuce is incredibly dense. I don't know. I'm looking at the nutrition of the foods and the availability to be able to store foods, like dehydrate them. Like that plantain, even though, let's say you find a whole field of it and you're like, ooh, that's a lot of it. I would like to save some of it for medicine, because I heard on David and Ransom's show that if you chew it and you put it on a rash, it will help that rash go away. Well, the same thing with powderized form. If you rehydrate it a little bit, it'll make like a small brown poultice that you could put over the same thing. Again, you're just storing it in a different fashion. So then, what things can be dried that can be used for later in terms of your food source too, and your medicines that you're walking around every day. So, if you can start to come at it from a mind frame in a different way of following the sun, taking from the plants while they're growing without destroying the plant so it continues to grow, and then from that massive continuous yield, might I add, once you set it up, then what can you store and how can you store it? And see, those are the kind of things that run through my mind when I'm trying to finally get to the farm that does straw bales, and then do this new technique called straw bale gardening, where you inoculate your straw bales with nitrogen fertilizer for the first 14 days to get it to start to break down. Put some microbes in there, EM, whatever, to get the microbial growth going at the same time. And then you plant into the straw bales, and because it's not as compact as earth, the roots grow more prolifically. And as that mulches down and, soil builder and different kind of compost on top continues to decompose during the growing season, you just are supposedly getting incredible yields, but no weeding. So then you start to look at the efficiencies on it. Okay, because weeds, my friend, it's going to take so long to get the weeds. So if you can come a different system that produces a higher amount of food with less weeds and less work in the garden, that's a win-win. But you're going to want to put a water timer on it also. So then you can get, like you talked about that. You might miss that one day. You might miss that 1 hour. A little bit late, a little bit early, missed a day, whatever. But on automatic timer, it won't matter. It'll always go on. So it's about efficiency gains now. Because if we're in a, resource scarce world, the last thing you want to get to do is like spend 3 hours a day out in the garden, when if you automate a few tiniest of things, you could spend 1 hour out there and save those 2 hours to do something else. So I look at it as a day, like we're going back to our forefathers' time. We're going to go about pioneering lifestyle. And there was very little free time at the point. Everybody was always doing something for survival, or preparing, or storing, or, processing something, whatever it was. There was very little idle time to just sit around. In the modern day, you still sit around, but they would watch TV and dehull the beans or something, or whatever it is. Picking the small leaves off of all the plants. If somebody harvested like 1,000 small of these plants, you got to pick all the small leaves or small flowers off it, whatever. You can still watch TV and do some other stuff like that. Watch your tube, listen to something while you're doing it. And I will say, things that are tedious, if you listen to something while you're doing it, makes that time far easier and just appears faster. And, Ransom, I'm looking at your putting the planetary K index. What you're showing there is a little different than what I have. I have a KP7 that turned purple. So let me see if I can send you that link while you're doing that. And those are the kind of things that go through my mind when I'm, doing the gardening and how I'm preparing something for it.
Yeah, I've been paying attention to this KP index because I'm doing, kind of like an unofficial experiment, or maybe it's not an experiment. I'm just documenting their behavior mentally. But I have a colony of rough harvester ants that are in the center of my yard, and everyone around here gets rid of them. They always poison them and get rid of them. However, I've realized that if I leave that in the center of all my flower beds, the ants in the early spring, they go and they dig out every single dead seed that's not going to produce. So like when you plant a bunch of radishes or something like that, and 2/3 of them sprout, the other ones don't, these ants will go and they'll dig the hole and they'll leave the live plants alone. But the best part of it is that everybody around me is constantly fighting with pocket gophers. They got pocket gophers messing up their lawns, messing up their, gardens and everything, and they're trapping them, they're poisoning them, which, that leads to all these other problems with wildlife and people's pets, and toxifying your food and all this other stuff. And I found a simple solution to that, and that is the harvester ant. Now, I kind of sidetracked with that, but they will, if you leave them alone. They're non-aggressive unless you mess with them. So they basically help you farm in the way that they keep the pocket gophers away, because they don't burrow tunnels, because they're not going to burrow into these things. They have really strong pain, bites that when they bite you, it's in extreme pain. It's really bad. So the gophers won't mess with it. So they leave all your plants alone. But what I've been noticing is there may be something to the ants as a real-time detector of what the sun is doing. And the reason I say this is because I've been paying attention to them for probably, all my life, but recently in the last couple of years, actually really monitoring them and paying attention to what they do. So on days with these KP indexes that go up to like 6 or 5.
Yeah, check out the slide I just sent you. It goes up to purple, up to 7, and that's not represented in what you're seeing here with the red bars. So I don't know why there's a difference in the information, even though it's a 3-hour plot on the planetary K index.
Yeah,
KP index.
Yeah, it's weird though with these ants. Like they must know this information already. They don't need a satellite. You know what I'm saying? They don't come out on these days, and I've watched them. And their most productive days are right here, where you see the KP index of 3. They're usually out doing all their business, and when it's really low, they're at slow production, and when it's really high, they don't come out at all. Like they know that they'll be burned. Here, let me load this. Picture you gave me.
But notice the difference in the KP. A 6 and a 7, that's very significant. That's a purple bar on the chart coming up to a KP7. But when you look on, what's that, NOAA.gov, SWPC, that's Space Weather Prediction Center. So it's www.swpc.noaa.gov, and you're looking for the products in the planetary K index. But it's still on the same 3-hour plot. It's still the same time frame, but they missed or have deleted that 7 KP index intensity strength.
Why would they do that? I noticed when the actual flare came out of the sun, there was a big delay on information about it.
Huge. Yeah, they erased a bunch of frames out of that.
What was that about? And also, do you think this is going to be a regular thing that someone like, the average gardener or citizen or whatever needs to pay attention to this? Because I noticed that our in-laws came, and ironically they flew at the peaks of these KD indexes, right? So they're up in the upper atmosphere, which is already known to have more radiation significantly than you get on the ground. So like when you take a flight, you're getting bombarded by these particles, and that's why there's cancer clusters and flight attendants, pilots, and other stuff. But it was just weird that they so happened to just be flying on these, and there's all these health effects that come from this. And I noticed that there was a big delay lately, and it seems like they may be getting worried that you don't really have to worry about cyber attacks as much as you have to worry about this cycle right here. And as you can see, recently we've had several M flares, a couple of X flares, minor ones, and then you got this CME here that produced this solar storm. And we've pretty much been being bombarded all this month with solar geomagnetic storms, I guess. This is predicted to go up, is it not, during this cycle?
This is a perfect example. This sunspot group was collapsing in on itself, and then it released that flare. It wasn't when it was ramping up in intensity when it released the magnetic field intertwining. Bam! You get that energetic release and magnetic twisting, snap the ropes, and then something goes out. This was when that era, that perturbation intensity diminishing, coming down on the backside when those two sunspots were almost decoupling magnetically, and wham, that thing came out of nowhere. It was such an anomalous release from the sun, the way it was already a dead sunspot is what they called it, and it released that, which is tells you something that is very different going on currently than the way what we understand the mechanisms of the twisting magnetic fields. Once they twist past a point where they can't intertwine any longer, they release. That current release takes the form of plasma ejecta outbound. But this was coming where they'd come to their maximum magnetic field intercoupling, and then it decoupled and it went inert almost, and then the solar flare came out. The mechanics of it don't make sense. So when you're looking at changes in the sun, yeah, imagine how those, like you say, your in-laws flying during this high KP index, like what kind of, maybe they'll turn on superhuman abilities after that. You never know. Because, normally it would take like an X magnitude, X3, X5, X8, depending, to get us up to this KP 7 or 8 prior. But now this is a super small CME that already is taking us to KP index 7 here. So the smaller the flare, now imagine if it truly was like an X5 or an X10 or an X2, whatever. This thing would be reading KP index of 9, 10 if there's a possibility of that, off the smallest of flares. So what's happening with the magnetic field on the planet? It seems like it's weakening or allowing a lot more of this cosmic particles to come into to affect Earth's jet streams and cloud cells, migratory patterns of animals, and behavior on the human, all in sync. So something's going off that, and then, this will affect food production as well, because if cloud cells and jet streams are moving into different locations, and the planting and harvesting and precipitation and drought patterns are off. So then everything starts to lose its cohesiveness of the rock solid cornerstones of society, planting and harvesting dates, and an economy that functions with supply chains that function. All of that is not functioning any longer, and then we have all the natural effects too. And these are coinciding, and they're moving down at the exact same timelines, minute by minute, awareness by awareness. And it's really strange when you look at it, studying these things about the sun for these last, since 2013, that governments know what's happening. People are aware of what's happening. They're not sure what's happening, but these distractions are there as you start to understand and feel differently. Your emotions can be guided and manipulated more because you're going to have your frequencies moving higher in these specific solar events. How'd you feel today? Did you feel the energy of the solar flare? Ransom, thank you for joining me tonight. All of you on Rumble and Twitch, shout out. YouTube, thank you very much. 420 TV treating us film for allowing us to host tonight. And Revolution Radio Studio 8.
Thank you for listening to Revolution